Okay.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another NIAPR's webinar in conjunction with the Center for Excellence on Cultural Competence, and of course, Cornell and Columbia University. We are glad that you are here. We've got some real experts here, and we've got a lot of people on this webinar. And so I want to welcome you to Building Hope: What CARES Economic Stimulus Payments Mean and Offer to Social Security Recipients. And we've got some experts here. I'd like to quickly introduce folks. We've got Ray Sabula from the Lisa Yang and Hockey Tan Employment Disability Institute at Cornell University. Oscar Jimenez Solomon, who is a Senior Research Staff Associate in the Department of Psychiatry at Columbia University Medical Center. And we've got Jessica Brooks, who is the Assistant Director for Financial Counseling and Coaching Programs, the New York City Office of Financial Empowerment. So we've got a lot of information, a lot of ground to cover today. And we're going to get right to it. So we're going to open up with Ray Sabula. Ray?
Okay, I'm ready. If we can have that first slide. There we go. We've got lots of stuff to talk about today, and I'm going to move through this stuff very, very fast. Please know that the information that you have, as this last bullet tells you, is correct today. Things have been changing. This act is an enormous piece of legislation. I believe we're at the point where the federal legislation is somewhat stable. We're now waiting for all of the agencies to potentially issue new instructions to incorporate their programs with some of the new benefits that are coming out. And I'm going to be focused on the benefits that are going to the workers. You can expect changes, expect surprises, and we're updating our sheet once a week now as things are rolling out and we're learning what's happening. But you will have a copy through Len tomorrow. If I can have the next slide, Len.
Sorry, Ray.
That's quite all right. Okay, the stimulus payment, which has now been called the economic impact payment, is the payment that is coming directly to each American individual. As you can see, the individuals, an individual with adjusted gross income, and that is for IRS purposes, under 75,000 or a couple under 150,000 are eligible. If you are the head of a household with one child with adjusted gross income under $112,500, you will receive that $1,200 maximum. After that, as your income gets higher, your payment gets lower. If you are a member of a couple, each member will get a $1,200 check. Now, the important thing here that's still a little bit wonky is that that kicker that is available for each dependent child pretty much is defining dependent child as an individual under the age of 17 and in school. Now, the only group that needs to be concerned would be an SSDI recipient or an SSI recipient who has dependent children and want to be sure that that $500 check is coming. So those two groups, if you're an SSI recipient, SSDI recipient, have not filed taxes in 2018 or 2019 and have qualifying children, you need to switch over to the IRS website and file a non-filer return. And that will allow these people to claim those dependents. Unfortunately, Monday we learned that the deadline for SSDI folks to do that was yesterday, the 22nd. That does not mean these people will not get that money. It just means they will have to wait until the next time they file taxes. And those payments can be paid even if the next time they file is in 2021. The deadline for SSI recipients is mid-May. So there's a little bit more time for that. And of course, with the SSI folks, please reach out because we're talking about needing a computer and needing an internet connection. And most of the places where we send our SSI folks to get those are closed. So you can assist them over the phone if necessary. Next slide, please, Len. All right, so for an example, mom and dad filing jointly with 3 qualifying children will receive a payment of $3,900. That payment is going to be paid in the manner that the person receives their benefits. So if they have a bank account, it will go by a direct deposit into that bank account. If they receive a monthly check, they will receive a check. Know that the paper checks could be delayed until sometime in September. I just learned the other day that the Direct Express, it's like an EBT card, will accept these payments as well. So your clients who are receiving benefits via that EBT card will also get that money. I'm going to skip the next part because we already talked about that phase out, but please be aware that the stimulus payments are not taxable. For some of you who were around in 2008 when the economy collapsed, the payments that we received during that collapse became countable income in the next year. That is not the case here. These will not be taxable. Next slide, Len. The CARES Act, this is an important paragraph. It's language straight out of the law. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, any stimulus payment made to an individual under this statute shall not be taken into account as income when it's received, and shall not be taken into account as a resource for a period of 12 months from the receipt for any federal, state, or local program financed in whole or in part by federal funds. That's going to be critical because most of our clients receive some form of benefit that is partially federally funded. And that's what we're looking for. The only programs that you're not going to be able to hide this money from would be a state general relief payment, if in fact there are any of those left, or potentially a fully state-funded housing project. But most of the needs-based benefits, TANF or New York Family Assistance, SNAP, HUD housing, none of this money is going to impact any of those programs. So the big programs will not be impacted. I'm not concerned about resources because even a family that we talked about that gets $3,900 is not likely to have much of this money left in 12 months. But if they do, remember we have protected savings mechanisms out there that we should get them in touch with, and most likely the ABLE account if that disability began before age 26. Next slide, Len.
Ray, I want to ask you just a very quick question
Sure.
because it pertains to the subjects that you just talked about. So how does it work if an SSD person is actually married and files jointly?
If an SSD person, SSDI, is married and filing jointly, there is nothing they need to do. They will automatically be paid. SSI folks, if it was a married SSI couple, same thing, automatically be paid. It's those couples that have dependent children that are under 17, that if they have not filed taxes, would have to go into the IRS to claim them. SSI folks are working now. If they have filed their taxes for this year, they have already claimed those kids, so they should be all set.
Okay.
The stimulus payments, again, are not received, not income in the month they received, and we've got 12 months. Now, that's a pretty simple concept. We're used to that kind of thing with the earned income tax credit in the SSI world. But the question was, how does the SSI recipient get the check? So if we can move on.
Just one more point of clarification, Ray. The deadline for SSD non-filers was yesterday?
Was yesterday, yes, and we found that out on the 20th. It went out as far as I was able to spread it. It came Monday afternoon as an instruction from the commissioner. Again, I'm not sure about this, but the tax filing deadline is now July. So if people are filing in July on SSDI and claim those kids, that may spur a payment, but my guess is the next time we file in 2021 will be when those $500 checks will be made available. I'm looking at this and thinking if this is going to, that IRS process, I'm trying to look at everything and get through this quickly. The IRS process that you're looking at to do non-filing takes about 15 minutes. It is possible for one of you out there with 5 clients to get on the phone with these clients and do this for them on your laptop. You'll get a different ID number for every person who you file on behalf of. The one thing that I would suggest, because we would be filing on their behalf, is to put together some kind of quick release of information or retainer agreement or service agreement that would indicate that we are inputting information that someone has given to us verbally. That way, if the client signs that, returns it to you, we're covered. And if the IRS comes back and says this information's all wrong, we have a document that says we were told to put this in. So that's the only caution I have for you, is to cover your butt. Okay, the next slide. What is a dependent for these $0 filers or the non-filers? This took 2 different definitions of dependents. It took qualifying child and it took child tax credits and kind of merged them. In order to be a dependent, to get this $500 kicker, you have to be claimed on somebody's tax return, including the non-filer tax return. Be under the age of 18 and in school. They must be related to you, marriage, blood, or adoption. The dependent cannot provide more than 50% of his or her own support during the tax year. They must be a citizen, U.S. national, or U.S. resident alien with a valid Social Security number, and live with the filer for at least half the year. So again, we've taken 2 definitions and merged it, but if the under 17-year-old person meets this qualification and these rules, you're all set. You know, there's a question about that 17 to 25-year-old group who, if you've listened to the news, has been cut out completely. Well, they haven't necessarily been cut out completely. If they don't meet this definition of dependent, they are independent, and if they file their own taxes, may get a $1,200 payment. So we need to talk with that 17 to 25-year-old group to make sure what's going on in their lives to make this apply to them. Next slide.
Ray, I want to just make sure we've got clarification here. So I'm back to the SSD, SSDI yesterday, yeah. So the deadline was to claim the dependent benefit, correct? It wasn't for
Yes.
For the $1,200 stimulus.
Absolutely. The SSDI population was always safe. They were going to get this money paid automatically. For those who did not file in 2018, 2019, yesterday's deadline was only for the $500 kickers. You know,
Okay,
I want to talk again about using this as an opportunity, and maybe a preview for Oscar. You know, this is an opportunity to get our clients banked. As I said, these checks are going to potentially make it to people in September. You know, there was a claim that it would happen in May. September was the first prediction. We're talking about major federal agencies here. I'm betting on September. Let's get some of these clients banked. If we can get clients banked right now and get direct deposit information to the IRS, these payments are going to be released much quicker. You know, so this is a good opportunity to get our clients out of check cashing stores and into banks. Next slide, please. All right, whoops. There we go. No impact of these stimulus payments on Title II benefits. They're insurance payments. There's no resource level, no problem. If that $3,900 family was a Title II family, they don't have a thing to worry about. These benefits are not going to be taxed at all. You know, so they should not be included in any tax determination. This, while these benefits may be taxable, was the case when I gave this to Len. So note that these benefits are not taxable at all and will not have to be claimed. The stimulus payments are unearned income. And for Title II, with no resource limits and only being impacted by earnings, no impact whatsoever on Title II. Title II is including SSDI, childhood disability benefits, and disabled widows payments, along with retirees if you run into a few of those. Next slide, please. So tax filing for Title II, nothing is necessary. These people are getting a Social Security benefit, and this is, you may think SSI is a Social Security benefit because that's the agency it comes from, but this statute made it very clear, even to those of us who understood that, it was like a kick in the teeth, that SSI is not a Social Security benefit, it's a welfare program. So again, just to repeat, these folks are going to get, Title II folks are going to get their benefits paid automatically. If they've not paid taxes in 2018, 2019, file for the IRS non-filer site. Now that site's still up, you know, and I'm going to tell you, I don't know if this is the case, but if I were a Title II recipient who found out Monday and just got in touch with somebody with a computer today and filed, and had the opportunity to do it, I'd do it, you know, and see what happens. Will it be kicked into action in July when the 15th deadline comes, or will it just sit there and wait? But I would take a shot and do it. Same advice for your other clients. If a Title II client is not banked, get them banked and get some direct deposit information so that these checks can come out quicker. Next slide, please. SNAP. We expected no income impact on SNAP. The stimulus payments are clearly not going to count. SNAP is a needs-based benefit. It's federally funded, and this meets the definition that we read, that notwithstanding language, and as a result, it's not income unreceived, and they have 12 months to get rid of that resource. Next slide. HUD, Housing and Urban Development, no impact. That $1,200 check will have no impact on their rent subsidies. And, we don't have any resource limits for HUD. The only thing that would count would be the interest that $1,200 produced out of your checking account. And, nowadays that interest is so minimal, nobody really cares. Remember though, if you're looking at a state-funded program, make sure that state-funded program is solely state-funded if you see a rent increase. If even a state-funded program has received any federal funds to build the buildings, to run the buildings, the money will be exempt. So check to see how that state-funded, that state housing program was developed. Okay, next slide. Okay, HUD has also put out mortgage security for single-family homeowners. This sounded great until you realized that it was only for those families who have HUD-insured loans. So it's a subset of every family. If the client does have a HUD-insured loan, there's going to be some extra forbearances, extensions, reduced payments, for a period of 6 months. And if this continues, or it's necessary for that family, an extra 6 months. So just remember, the first 6 months is there. The second 6 months, as it says on the slide, requires an affirmative request from our clients. Next slide.
Ray, I'd like to quickly ask a question. We're getting a lot of questions on folks that have rep payees. Can you talk a little bit about that, and then we'll move on to Oscar?
I can talk a lot about that, and I don't want to. Rep payees is one of those triggers. You just triggered something. A rep payee can only control Social Security funds. Stimulus payments are not Social Security funds. However, the rep payee is generally holding the checkbook. That stimulus payment will be direct deposited into. So I'm going to tell you that the rep payee should be turning that money over to their clients. And particularly since we've got 12 months to spend that money down. If it's sitting in an account that is controlled by a rep payee, I can't guarantee anybody that money is going to be spent. So I am thinking that if a client wanted that money from their rep payee, they should have every right to it.
Okay, next slide, and then we'll move on to Oscar. So Ray, this will be your last slide.
Absolutely, absolutely. Medicaid, wonderful news here. I'm glad I'm ending on an up note. New York was a holdout because they wanted to use this opportunity to completely revamp the Medicaid program, but all 50 states have accepted that 6.2 federal increase, and the federal Medicaid assistance percentage is the part of Medicaid that that the federal government pays. New York is a 50-50 state. So now the feds are kicking in 56.2. The states must agree upon accepting that not to terminate Medicaid from any recipient who had Medicaid when this national emergency was declared, or if they became eligible for Medicaid during the emergency. We've got a lot of people laid off, going back onto SSI, getting Medicaid. We have a lot of people who weren't on benefits applying for Medicaid for their families while they're unemployed. So this is great news. You know, when you talk about the $600 bumps for unemployment, if somebody does go to work, no Medicaid terminations. With that being said, at least I ended on a smile. Oscar, it's all yours.
Folks, I will say this, I am copying all these questions down. We will have an opportunity at the end to talk about the questions and to pose some questions. Even questions that we don't get to on the webinar, we will actually get, have all of these experts available to complete these questions and get them out to you all. Oscar?
Thank you, Len. Hopefully, can you hear me okay? Good afternoon, everyone. Very grateful to be here with all of you today. Thank you so much, Len, Harvey, for the opportunity to collaborate on this webinar. And I also want to just put a plug in for and congratulate NIAPRS for the leadership that you all have been taking at this time of crisis, and at a time when people with behavioral health conditions have such vulnerability to being impacted by COVID-19 and also the economic crisis that will follow, especially because unfortunately we've known for a long time that people with behavioral health conditions are more likely to live in poverty, are more likely to belong to racial ethnic minorities, especially in the public mental health system, and also have chronic conditions that are making more vulnerable to not only infection and death, but also to the economic impact. And finally, also the fact that many people are not employed, or if they are employed in jobs that are low wage with little benefits and much more unstable. So if we could go to the next slide, what I'd like to do today is share with you some bad news and some good news. And I'll start with the bad, and or at least based on the research that we have, especially from the last big economic recession we had over a decade ago. There's quite a bit that we already know, and we can almost predict what and how the economic crisis related to COVID-19 is going to impact individuals. This is a summary slide based on research, both from times of economic crisis and times of economic growth. We know that those who live in poverty, are unemployed, and live in financial distress are more likely to report lower quality of life, more dissatisfaction with life, shame, hopelessness, and social isolation. And all this seems to be very much correlated to the fact that we also see in those communities that are struggling financially, higher levels of depression, anxiety, and also suicidal ideation and suicidal attempts, and also be more likely to die by suicide. But I'm going to go to the next slide, Len. So again, this is a 10,000-foot summary of the research. This slide is based on literature review our team has been working on, with about 80 plus studies that document the impact of these economic stressors on anxiety, hopelessness, depression, and suicidal risk. And especially during times of economic crisis, what we have seen is that increasing unemployment, foreclosures, evictions, basic inability to meet basic needs like food, on the objective end of things, have a significant and strong impact on psychosocial wellness. And not only the objective indicators seem to have a strong impact, but also the subjective, what we call the subjective economic distress, which is how people experience that, whether people experience that as something that they can overcome or something that will hold them down in the future. We can call that financial hopelessness, for example. Sense that there's a threat that something really bad's going to happen, which is one of the main predictors for suicide, for example. And also financial shame, feeling bad for what's happening and tending to internalize that and feel that it is my fault, and which is unfortunately something that is very much perpetuated by many of the policies that we live with. So when we go to the next slide, that's the bad news. The good news is that we also know what kinds of programs, policies, interventions can actually help individuals and communities to buffer the impact of economic recession. We know, for example, from larger scale research that states that invest more on social welfare and have higher levels of social welfare spending, meaning social services, TANF, SNAP, and cash payments for families that are low income, can buffer the impact of economic recession on suicide, for example. We see that the countries who during the, and communities that during the economic recession of 2008, 2009, were able to maintain a level of social supports for economic supports for communities, were able to actually buffer the impact and not see the increases in suicides, for example, that other communities saw. And an example of that is that in the United States, it's estimated about 5,000 deaths by suicide were attributed to the economic crisis of those years. And the good news, though, is that those deaths and the psychiatric distress that is underlying that in a much larger proportion is preventable and really is in our hands as individual providers, advocates, and also communities and authorities that can help improve either these programs or access to these programs. We know the same thing around unemployment insurance, that unemployment states that have greater access to unemployment insurance can also buffer the impact that economic recession has on suicide rates. The same thing with minimum wage. And here's where we start getting into perhaps interventions that we can work at the community level and provider level, which is, for example, access to the earned income tax credit. We know from research that people who have access to the earned income tax credit can actually buffer the depression that they could experience otherwise, and also the suicidal ideation and behaviors. And at the more macro level, we see that states and communities that have more access to the EITC see lower rates of suicide. And then also at the more program level, there are interventions and much research that's been growing during the last 10 years about the impact that economic empowerment interventions that can be run by mental health programs like yours, peer-run programs, et cetera, can also have a positive impact on hopelessness, depression, and the like. Why don't we go to the next slide, because we have some other ideas of things I wanted to share with you. Sorry, this slide got a little crooked here in our last minute organizing. One of the key areas at the provider level we can work on, and advocates as well, and peer support programs especially, is in building what we call financial hope. We talk about hope a lot in recovery, and we think of recovery as hope as a very essential component of rehabilitation and recovery, and yet at times we don't really quite talk specifically what that means. So we wanted to offer a framework. This comes from Snyder's hope theory that breaks down this notion of hope in 3 levels. They see and they document through the decades of research that they already have that people who are hopeful tend to have clarity about their goals. But most essentially, they have a sense that there are pathways to achieve those goals, and they have a sense that I can do this, that they can do it, that they're able to activate the pathways that are available to them. So with this framework, when we go to the next slide, we apply this to financial empowerment, and And the idea here being that what applying this framework and trying to address the financial hardship that many individuals and communities are experiencing, we want to offer you these strategies that for you to think about concrete strategies that can tackle each of these three components, whether it is by helping engaging people in conversations about what their financial hardship goals are, how they, what's really pressing them and what they want to improve. But most essentially, and Ray just gave us an excellent set of examples of this other component, this other leg in this tool, which is pathways, is what are the concrete services, supports, financial empowerment supports, services like financial counseling that Jess Brooks is going to talk to us about, economic empowerment, economic supports under CARES Act, other community-based supports that are available in your communities. And then finally, and very important area, for example, for peer programs is to build a sense of agency, the sense that we can do this, having hope that I'm able to activate this and that I have it within me to actually improve this. And with that, I'll just say, pass quickly through the last two slides to talk a little bit about something that is right in our backyard and, it's really very accessible to many programs, which is the stories that we have in our communities, whether it is our programs, our colleagues, our friends, of overcoming financial hardship. This picture comes from a course that some of us developed. It's already available on the Academy of Peer Services, run by the state of New York. It's free, available, especially it's geared towards peer providers, but it's available for any one interested in peer support type strategies. And this is part of the financial wellness course in peer support. Go to the next slide. We just wanted to put a plug in very briefly is to the role that all of us can have in sharing these stories and fostering the sharing of some of these stories. There are many stories out there today about the hardship and the pain and the suffering and the death. This is a time when peer support providers, rehabilitation providers, and advocates, and clinicians, we all need to come together to also share some of the stories of overcoming hope, of the experience of hardship, and also of the tools that people have had and employed to be able to access the resources they needed and to be able to improve their wellness and recovery. And very quickly, Len, I want to finish this by just sharing and mentioning briefly, if you go to the next slide, this is a link to the Academy of Peer Services course. This is something that, again, is available here, especially for peer providers, but not all. On the slide that you will receive, you will also receive links to a couple of tools that NIAPRS developed from the We Can Save campaign that provides rehabilitation providers and also peer providers with very concrete strategies of how to engage people in conversations and support them. And with that, I think I'm going to pass it on to our colleague, Jess Brooks from the New York City Financial Empowerment Center. Thank you for the time.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this presentation. Can you back up one slide, Lynn? Thank you. So I'm here today to talk about the financial empowerment centers and financial counseling and coaching that the New York City Department of Consumer and Worker Protection offers. So zooming out a little bit, the financial empowerment centers are actually the first taxpayer-funded financial counseling program in the country, which is very, very exciting. And this you see here on, this is one of our old ads from, I think, 2014, and I think is very relevant, especially after Oscar's presentation. So Michelle says a lot of people come to the city's financial empowerment centers feeling helpless. And I always tell them it doesn't matter how much money you make or how much debt you're in, we're gonna make a plan together. And that is so true today. We successfully moved all of our financial counseling operations online in mid-March when everything started shutting down. And so we are at full capacity completely remotely. All appointments are over the phone, but all of our financial counselors are working full time. So we do have availability to help your clients if they do need financial counseling. So I want to talk a little bit about what financial counselors can do and what they can't do. So Len, if you could go to the next slide. There we go. So financial counselors are basically financial advisors for people who aren't rich. The financial counselors can help clients reduce their debt, deal with debt collectors. If somebody's getting harassed, they can help send cease and desist letters. We help them understand their rights and responsibilities when it comes to student loans. So that could be helping somebody get into an income-based repayment plan and understand, how to deal with student loans that are in default. We work with clients on improving their credit scores or establishing credit if somebody was credit invisible. We help people balance their budget, which is the core piece of anybody's personal finances. Opening a bank account, Ray was talking earlier about how really being banked is really important to receive the economic impact payments. We do get a lot of clients who are unbanked or underbanked, so we help connect them to safe and affordable financial products. We work with clients to start an emergency savings account that is, very, very top of mind for a lot of folks right now. We know that many people don't even have, the minimum, $400 in emergency savings to weather a personal financial crisis. With small business owners, we do a lot of work with small business owners, not on the business side of things, but on their personal finances. Small business owners have a tendency to mix their business and their personal finances, so we work with them on separating those, and then of course saving and planning for the future. So these are all of our kind of standard talking points, but if you can go to the next slide, Len. Typically we do work with a lot of folks who are experiencing some type of financial crisis, people who are at risk of eviction and things of that nature. So also wanted to highlight what financial counselors can do for somebody who is experiencing a personal financial crisis. So the presentation that Ray did earlier on the economic impact payments, we did something very similar for all of the financial counselors very recently. They're all experts now in the economic impact payments, helping clients understand their eligibility for those payments. And then they will also help them navigate the IRS Get My Payment website, and then ideally sign up for direct deposit, help them open a bank account, and then sign up for direct deposit if the client is unbanked. And then helping them navigate sudden changes to their household budget or income, like those income shocks, are a reality, especially in New York City anyway, because a lot of people work, multiple jobs and have income volatility. So counselors can help with that, and then, sort of recalibrate your budget, manage their money, and set up a spending plan. You have to really prioritize what which expenses to pay when you're in a budget crunch, like many folks are. And then supporting clients in contacting creditors regarding their existing loans or credit accounts, student loans, potentially drafting letters to apply for, hardship programs, lower payments or suspending payments or forbearance, helping them develop a strategy to minimize debt. And the counselors will provide referrals to local, state, and national emergency services and other nonprofits. Can you go to the next slide, Len? One more.
All right.
Just wanted to highlight what we don't do. So we don't file taxes for clients, and we don't help them with a simplified form for typical non-filers. Ray was talking about providing some of your clients like that type of assistance. We will stop short of that, but the DCWP has an NYC free tax prep program, which is currently kind of paused, but they are about to start launching remote services. So we're very excited about that. So the financial counselors would refer to a tax professional if they need help, either with the simplified form or just filing their taxes in general. We also cannot assist with unemployment claims. We're not set up with the Department of Labor to be able to intervene or provide any assistance, but the counselors would direct them to the appropriate resources in the right place on the Department of Labor's website. We also cannot apply for benefits on behalf of the client. We call them financial empowerment centers because we are empowering our clients to do things for themselves. Sometimes we'll do things with them, but we will never do things for them. And we also don't provide grants or any type of loans. We have, financial counselors are incredibly resourceful on their own, but we put together a very comprehensive resource guide and shared that with them and are updating it on a regular basis so they know exactly where to refer people to, if they need additional types of wraparound services, if they need to apply for SNAP, if they need housing assistance, things of that nature. And then can you go to the next slide? All right, so here's the practical piece. So if you go to nyc.gov/talkmoney, that will actually take you to the page on the DCWP website, but you can click through. And what I have here on the slide is a screenshot of our appointment scheduling system. And there's a map of all of New York City. So you can see where all of our locations used to be. We left them all on there. So in case if somebody's booking an appointment, hopefully they'll be booking an appointment at one of our nonprofit service providers that has a location in their area so that, once this is all over, that they'll be able to go see their counselor face to face. We have 7 nonprofit providers, and all of their appointments are available online. You can see the ones that aren't grayed out. So there's no location attached to any of them anymore. It's all by the phone. So you can select by the provider. You can pick a particular counselor. You can pick a particular date and time. There's a bunch of different ways that you can search for appointments on there. So I would encourage you all to check it out. And please do, refer your clients who could benefit from financial counseling. There's a lot of folks right now who do, and we have the capacity to take more referrals. And I wanted to back up here just 1 second because we do have other financial counseling programs that I didn't talk about before. There's 2 of them. One is called Ready to Rent, and that is financial counseling for people who are seeking affordable housing in the Department of Housing Preservation's and Development's Housing Connect lottery. And then the other one is called Empowered NYC, which is financial counseling for people with disabilities and their families. And Oscar has been a member of the working group for Empowered NYC. Both of those other 2 programs are essentially the same thing as the financial empowerment centers. It's just that those counselors have received additional training. Ready to Rent has training in low-income housing credit or low-income tax credit housing. I always love that acronym. But they're experts in doing those HUD calculations to make sure that your income is done properly when you submit your housing application. And then Empowered NYC counselors have an extensive amount of additional training in disability benefits, ABLE accounts, how to deal with Social Security overpayments, all of those things. It's a smaller program, but when you click through to our website to the scheduling page, it'll give you the option of those 3 different programs. So just wanted to highlight that those were there. And then if you could go to the last slide, Len. I know there's some folks on the call who are not based in New York City, so I wanted to provide some resources to financial counseling that are not the financial empowerment centers. There's an organization called Cities for Financial Empowerment, which is working with municipalities across the country to bring financial empowerment centers to their communities. So working with local governments to drum up funding to be able to have their own taxpayer-funded financial counseling programs. The link to the CFE Fund's website is there, so you can see all of the cities that they're in. And I highlighted the 3 cities who do have programs that are in the area up and running: Rochester, New York, Syracuse, and New Haven, Connecticut. And then for anybody who's not in one of those cities and needs to look for resources, you can search locally, check your local United Way, or you can go to the National Foundation for Credit Counseling, and that is they are sort of an umbrella and certifying organization for consumer credit counseling agencies across the country. So just wanted to make sure that everybody has access to those resources as well if you're not located in New York City. And that's all I have for you. So I think go take it back, Len. And
sure. Ray, Oscar, if you could come on the screen as well. I want to get these questions real quick. Ray, can we get some information on unemployment and how that's impacting people?
Unemployment, I think, is a double-edged sword right now. I mean, self-employed people who are gig workers, those Lyft drivers, the Uber drivers, for the first time in history are able to apply. And I understand that at least here in New Mexico, those applications for self-employment are available today. So that's something you should look for really quickly in New York for for that type of employee. The good thing about it is that for those self-employed people, there are special calculations involved. So they don't have to meet the New York base period. They would get a smaller payment as a result, but you only need $1 of state unemployment in order to pull in that $600 a week federal kicker. You know, that's a lot of money. Yeah, and the good thing is that if we talk about SSDI in New York, a person can receive SSDI and unemployment. That $600 a week is extra money. It doesn't count as income because it's not earned. And it doesn't count as a resource because SSDI folks have no resources. On the SSI side, yes, it counts as unearned income and will likely zero out the SSI check. But we're talking about $827 a month versus over $2,400 a month. Remember I said nobody can have their Medicaid terminated during this period of time. So I'm encouraging everybody who's on SSI to apply for unemployment. Their benefits go into suspense. They're not terminated, and they can be suspended for 12 consecutive months. The $600 kicker ends July 31st. That's not within, that's well within the 12-month period that we're talking about. When that ends, call Social Security. The unemployment benefits that are coming in may give rise to a cash payment. In December, at the end of the year, the 39-week extension is over, still within that 12-month period. So an SSI recipient can call Social Security, do the math again, and get their SSI back with no applications. So the difference right now is $827 in Medicaid or $2,400 a month, plus the state unemployment that you're eligible for and Medicaid.
Yeah, Ray, one other question before we've got to let you go. Can we get clarification as to whether or not client payee will be in receipt of their stimulus check?
You know, if it's a, you know, it really all, it can happen so many ways now. If the payee has the direct deposit account that the benefits are being paid into, then that stimulus payment is going into that account. If the individual is receiving their payments via a check to the rep payee, my guess is that money is going to the rep payee because that's the address the IRS has. You know, so, you know, if there's, I don't believe the rep payee program is going to be amenable to that direct express EBT card. So my guess is most of these people are going to get those benefits seen going to their rep payee.
Okay. Ray, I understand you've got to go. You've got to jump on another webinar. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
We'll be seeing Ray and another, you're going to see Ray on another one because there's just so much information. Thank you so much, Ray.
Bye-bye.
Oscar,
thank you.
We've got a question for you. Would you recommend SSI recipients open ABLE accounts with their stimulus checks to help them build a sense of financial stability and well-being?
Yes, absolutely. I'm very glad that this question came up. There are a number of resources we didn't get the chance to talk about today. We're gonna include a slide with links to some places where you can find more information about it. I'll just mention them briefly. Achieving a Better Life Experience, ABLE, is a very important program that is being still unfortunately underutilized. For those who live or work in New York City, Jess, I understand that through Empowered NYC, the counselors are able to connect people to the ABLE program, correct?
Correct. Yeah, the Financial Empowerment Center counselors could do that too, but the Empowered NYC counselors are a little bit more well versed in it. But it's all the same network. So if somebody went to a Financial Empowerment Center for that help, we would be able, if that counselor needed a tip, they could just call their colleague.
Yes, great. And I'll just say 20 words about it. Achieving a better life experience is a program that can help people who receive Social Security and other benefits who have a disability to save money, protect their eligibility for SSI and other Medicaid and other public benefits. We'll put in a resource for those of you who are not in New York City that gives more information about the New York State program. But absolutely, I think this is an opportunity to encourage people who may be able to put some money aside to actually do it in a safe way. Because one of the things that we see as a big problem in the research is that many people in the behavioral health system, like many Americans, but even more so, have zero savings. Not $100, not $200 in the bank, not $500. And for many people, that can be the difference between being homeless or not, or being in extreme anxiety. So that's one option. We also wanted to put a plug in for the earning income tax credit. Many people don't know that they're eligible. It's also, in addition to the current stimulus payments, someone, if they file taxes, they may find out, they prepare taxes and file taxes, they may find out that they're eligible for the earned income tax credit and get a significant, depending on their situation, significant tax break. We put already a link in the chat to the IRS website. Many sites that offer free tax preparation assistance are closed at the moment because of the epidemic. But some of them are open. You can go there to find a local site that may be able to help you. And if not now, potentially in the next few months, many of these sites are available beyond the filing deadline. So take advantage of that. Try to get some information to either for yourself or for people that you support about both ABLE and the earned income tax credit.
Thank you, Oscar. One last question, Jessica. Do you work with people that are not receiving any kind of financial assistance, just low-income folks?
We work with anybody. I answered that question in the chat. There's no income restriction. There's no immigration restriction. You just have to be 18 years old and live or work in New York City.
Great. Folks, we have got so many questions here. As I said, actually, we have over 100 questions. So we are taking down all these questions. We will make sure that everyone gets copies of these questions and answers to those questions. Give us a couple of days to answer them all, but you will get answers to these questions. We'll have to email them out to you. Final thoughts, Oscar, Jessica?
Well, the most important, I think, that during this time, it is more essential than ever that all of us, whether we work closely in issues related to economic distress or not, we can be clinicians or rehab providers or peer support individuals. I think it's more important than ever that all of us make a concerted effort to get informed about the economic supports that can help the people that we support. I think we've gone for too long not getting at least a one-on-one. This is, we don't have to become financial counselors like Jess and her team to be able to become experts. All we need to do is just enough to be able to know that someone may be eligible for a program and know where to refer them. So I encourage all of you to, in fact, do that, especially now more than ever. People's lives might depend on it.
And right now, I mean, it's just, there's a lot of people experiencing, copious amounts of stress and anxiety and shame, and that it makes it hard for you to make, positive financial decisions when you're underneath that type of stress. So that's why it can be really beneficial to speak with a counselor who not only is an expert in personal finances, but isn't your mom or your brother or your partner or, whomever, right? That there's no, they don't have any, your financial decisions don't affect the financial counselor, so they can provide you clear, unbiased advice and help you get through it. And then also connect you to the right resources. As we all know, there's a lot of scams and a lot of predators out there, and it can be hard to tell the good guys from the bad guys, and the financial counselors will make sure that when people are applying for programs and supports and things, that they're doing it at places that are reputable.
Well, I want to thank both Oscar and Jessica, as well as Ray. Tons of questions. By the way, folks, the PowerPoint and the recording will be on the NIAPR's website at www.nyaprs, that's NIAPRS.org. I want to thank everybody for attending, well over 300 people. Thanks so much, and be on the lookout for an announcement of another webinar on this very subject, just simply because we are getting information in every day, and we'll probably have to make it longer than an hour. So stay safe and be well, and have a good rest of your day. Thanks, folks.
Thank you, Lynn.